Hi there, I'm Liz Walls, co-founder of Cancalia Engineering and Consulting, and over the next few minutes, I'll talk about how the Continuum Wind Flow Model was created and developed over the last decade, and how we got to where we are today. The development of Continuum started back in 2006 with meteorologist and wind energy pioneer Jack Klein, who first observed a correlation between terrain exposure and wind speed. You may not be familiar with terrain exposure, so allow me to quickly explain the meaning of this term. The exposure is the average elevation difference between a site and the surrounding terrain within a specified radius, weighted by the inverse distance. Here's the equation, but really it's easier to explain with a couple of examples. At this site, we have both a positive upwind and positive downwind exposure, whereas in this situation, where the terrain is higher upwind of the met site, we have a negative upwind and positive downwind exposure. So again, the exposure is the average elevation difference between a site and the surrounding terrain and is calculated for both the upwind and downwind directions. Okay, back to the timeline. In 2007, Jack introduced exposure-based modeling. Here, he shows a strong correlation between wind speed and downwind exposure. In 2010, I started working with Jack, and soon after I began developing the wind flow modeling software. At the end of 2011, we introduced RAM-Wind 1.0, which modeled wind speed by forming linear regressions between exposure and wind speed. RAM-Wind was simple to set up and quickly generated accurate estimates, but it was based purely on empirical data, was limited to sites with at least 4 METs, plus the surface roughness was not used. It was clear that more research was needed. So in early 2013, I kicked off a study where I analyzed models from 12 different project sites to try to find some sort of common link, and I found that there exists a relationship between the coefficients and terrain complexity. With this defined relationship, we then had a method to predict the coefficients instead of having to rely on empirical observation. I presented my model at the OEA workshop and demonstrated the accuracy by predicting the wind speed at each MET site used in the study. The errors were quite low and ranged from 1.7% at simple sites to around 3% at highly complex sites. Then in early 2014, I formed Cancalia and continued with the software development. That spring, we introduced Continuum 1.0. At this stage, though, the model still relied somewhat on empirical observation, so I went back to basics and conducted a simplified analysis of Navier-Stokes, the same equation used in CFD. This led to the current model, where the coefficients are defined as a function of complexity and are specific to 3 types of flow. In December 2014, we announced the release of Continuum 1.1. A few months later, I published the model theory in the journal Wind Engineering, and in the paper I included a case study to validate the model, and the RMS error of the wind speed estimates at 11 sites was only 0.9%. That spring, we filed for a U.S. patent that encompasses the application of the model. Later in 2015, I developed a surface roughness model, incorporated 2 wake models, and built a net energy module into Continuum. Then we conducted a study where we compared model results of WASP, Open Wind, and Continuum. We conducted a round robin using each model, and the RMS error of Continuum was 1.55%, about half the error found from the other 2. I also conducted a study using 11 project sites where I compared the results with and without the surface roughness model. This further validated Continuum and demonstrated the model accuracy. Continuum 2.0 was unveiled at the OEA workshop in the fall of 2015. And that brings us to today, after about 10 years of testing, developing, and validating the model. By combining empirical observation with fluid theory, Continuum has evolved into a highly accurate method of predicting wind speed quickly and easily. To learn more about the model or to request a free trial license of Continuum, visit our website or send us an email at info@cancalia.com. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time.